Prince Harry wants to elevate Meghan Markle to the status accorded to her, and why it reminds some royal commentators of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Plus, what outlet is reporting that Harry and Meghan could lose their titles soon? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's trip to Colombia has inspired royal author Anna Pasternak to draw a comparison to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. It was less than 1 year after the abdication crisis when Wallace and Edward took an ill-advised trip to Germany. Speaking to the Telegraph, Pasternak explained, "They accepted the invitation because Edward felt so hurt and angered by the way Wallace had been rejected by the royal family, and he desperately wanted her to experience the pomp and ceremony of a royal tour." She says he wanted Wallace to be addressed as HRH and for people to curtsy to her. "I'm not suggesting that Harry wants the pomp and ceremony of a royal tour, but there is a feeling that he'd like to elevate Meghan to the status accorded to her." The story of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, the former King Edward VIII and Wallace Simpson, is one of the most captivating royal sagas of the 20th century. The couple's controversial relationship led to a constitutional crisis in the United Kingdom, culminating in Edward's abdication in 1936. Just a year later, in 1937, the newly minted Duke and Duchess of Windsor embarked on a journey to Germany, sparking a storm of controversy and intrigue. This trip, set against the backdrop of rising tensions in Europe in the shadow of Nazi Germany, remains a deeply controversial chapter in royal history. To understand the significance of the Duke and Duchess's trip to Germany, it is essential to revisit the events leading up to Edward's abdication. Edward ascended to the throne in January of 1936, following the death of his father, King George V. From the outset, Edward's reign was marked by controversy, largely due to his relationship with Wallace Simpson, an American socialite and divorcee. Wallace Simpson had already been divorced once and was in the process of divorcing her second husband when the UK media finally broke the story that had already set the United States on fire. Wallace was romantically involved with Edward, King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of the British Dominions and Emperor of India. The relationship was seen as scandalous by many in British society, particularly the establishment and the Church of England, which disapproved of divorce. As the head of the church, Edward was expected to uphold its teachings, making his eagerness to marry Wallace a constitutional crisis. The British government, led by Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, made it clear that Edward could not marry Wallace and remain king. Faced with the impossible choice between the throne and the woman he loved, Edward chose to abdicate. Actually, that's a little dramatic. I don't know if he ever really wanted to be king. Anyway, on December 11th, 1936, he became the first British monarch to voluntarily relinquish the crown, passing the throne onto his younger brother, who became King George VI. In his abdication speech, Edward famously declared, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love." Following the abdication, Edward was given the title Duke of Windsor, and the couple married in June of 1937. The abdication had significant political and personal ramifications, leaving the Duke and Duchess largely isolated from the British royal family. Seeking purpose and recognition, the couple embarked on a series of trips abroad, including the infamous visit to Germany. In October 1937, just a few months after their marriage, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor traveled to Germany. The trip was ostensibly a private visit, but it quickly became a matter of international interest and concern. Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, was in the midst of its aggressive expansionist policies and the persecution of Jews and other minorities. The Nazi regime was becoming increasingly powerful, and Europe was on the brink of war. The Duke and Duchess's decision to visit Germany at such a time raised eyebrows and led to speculation about their political sympathies. Edward had previously expressed admiration for some aspects of Hitler's regime, particularly its strong stance against communism. but the extent of his support for the Nazis has been a matter of historical debate. Royal author Andrew Morton, who scored the incredible scoop in 1992 with Diana, Her True Story, wrote a fascinating book on this specific topic called 17 Carnations, the Windsors, the Nazis, and the Cover-Up. Among their circle was a German foreign minister who took such a liking to Wallace that he ordered daily bouquets of 17 carnations to be delivered to her door, rumored to signify the number of times they had slept together. During the Windsors' visit, the Duke and Duchess met with several high-ranking Nazi officials, including Hitler. One of the most controversial aspects of the trip was the warm reception that the Duke and Duchess received from the Nazi leadership. Photographs of the couple with Hitler and other leaders were widely circulated, causing a sensation in the press. Hitler reportedly admired Edward and saw him as a potential ally, or at least a figure who could influence British policy in favor of Germany. There were even rumors that the Nazis considered reinstalling Edward as king in the event of a German invasion of Britain. We'll revisit that in a moment. The visit was seen by many as a diplomatic disaster and a public relations nightmare for the British government at a time when tensions between Britain and Germany were escalating. The sight of a former British king and his wife associating with the leaders of the Nazi regime was deeply troubling. It fueled suspicions that Edward harbored pro-German or even pro-Nazi sympathies, a perception that would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was not merely a social visit. It had significant political implications. The British government under Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain was deeply concerned about the optics of the visit. At a time when Britain was pursuing a policy of appeasement towards Germany, photos of a former monarch meeting with Hitler was problematic, to say the least. The trip also had personal consequences for the Duke and Duchess. It further strained their already tense relationship with the British royal family and the government. King George and Queen Elizabeth were reportedly appalled by the visit, and it deepened the rift between the brothers. The British press, which had previously been somewhat sympathetic towards Edward, turned on him, portraying the visit as evidence of his poor judgment and questionable loyalties. The controversy surrounding the trip was aggravated by the outbreak of World War II in 1939. As the horrors of the Nazi regime became apparent, the Duke and Duchess's association with Hitler and his inner circle became a source of embarrassment and scandal. The British government sought to distance itself from the couple, and they were effectively exiled to the Bahamas, where Edward served as governor during the war. The scandal was even explored in an episode of Netflix's The Crown. In season 2, episode 6, Queen Elizabeth II reviews documentation that details the involvement of her exiled uncle Edward, the Duke of Windsor, and the Nazis. The episode explores the Windsor file, the German documents that suggest that the Duke had a relationship with Nazi high command and sympathized with aspects of Hitler's regime. The question of whether the Duke of Windsor harbored pro-Nazi sympathies in real life has been the subject of much debate and speculation. Some historians have argued that Edward was naive and politically inexperienced, lacking the insight to fully understand the implications of his actions. Others suggest that he was genuinely sympathetic to the Nazis, pointing to his private correspondence and statements made during the war. The actual Windsor file, recovered after the war, included references to Edward's alleged willingness to collaborate with the Nazis in the event of a German victory. Regardless of the true nature of his beliefs, Edward's actions during the 1937 trip to Germany have left a lasting stain on his legacy. The visit is often cited as evidence of his poor judgment and his failure to appreciate the seriousness of the situation in Europe at the time. Wallace Simpson, the Duchess of Windsor, has also been a subject of controversy and hot goss. Many in British society blamed her for Edward's abdication, viewing her as an ambitious and manipulative figure who sought to elevate her social status by marrying a king. Her role in the 1937 trip to Germany has been scrutinized, with some suggesting that she shared her husband's admiration for the Nazis. There is little concrete evidence to suggest that Wallace was a committed Nazi sympathizer, but her actions and associations during the trip did little to dispel such rumors. Her presence at the meeting with Hitler and her apparent enjoyment of the social events organized by the Nazi leadership were seen as troubling by many observers. In the years following the trip, Wallace continued to be a polarizing figure. She and the Duke led a largely isolated life, living in exile from the British royal family and society. Their lavish lifestyle and frequent travels were often the subject of gossip, and they remained under the shadow of that trip and the suspicions it had raised. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor's German excursion remains one of the most unfortunate episodes in the history of the British royal family. The visit coming so soon after Edward's abdication and at a time of rising tensions in Europe was seen as a diplomatic and public relations fail, and the couple's meeting with Hitler raised serious questions about their judgment. While Colombia is no Disneyland, it's certainly not Nazi Germany either, and I don't want anyone to think we're making that comparison. The comparison Anna Pasternak is making is the lack of judgment and eagerness to be taken seriously and respected on an international level. Edward's acceptance to visit Germany was an act of rebellion. He was determined to have Wallace acknowledged, similar to Prince Harry's eagerness to see Meghan receive the status accorded to her, according to Pasternak. Wallace and Edward's trip to Germany left a lasting impact on their legacy. It is a reminder of the complex and often troubling intersections of personal relationships, personal agendas, politics, and ultimately history. Pasternak told The Telegraph that she believes Prince Harry and Meghan really value the approval of the people of the country they're visiting, adding, they can go and be honored in their own right. But what have they accomplished in their own right? At the end of the day, the British royal family gave them their platform. Harry and Meghan's insistence on executing this half-in, half-out royal lifestyle that the Queen denied them is also an act of rebellion that could jeopardize the British royal family's brand. The Queen explicitly told them that this was not an option for them, yet they are conducting international trips like their last name is Obama. I think it's time that King Charles and Prince William explore serious options to strip the Sussexes of any titles they are using to open doors for themselves. The Sussexes criticize and tear down the same institution that, in my opinion, is the only thing in their lives that is of any professional value, their association with the British royal family. Now the Daily Express is reporting that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's titles are up for discussion at Balmoral next week when the royal family meets for their annual summer holiday. According to an extremely well-placed source, not only will Harry and Meghan's tours and upcoming trip be on the agenda, but also their titles and peerages will be up for discussion. The source told the Express that although it will be easy for King Charles to strip the Sussexes of their gifted titles, Prince, for example, it will be a different story when it comes to their peerages. Quote, there could be a challenge made if any peerages are removed. So this is something that needs to be navigated extremely carefully. The title of Prince and HRH are both gifts from the sovereign and can be stripped quite easily. But Harry's dukedom, earldom, and barony will have to be removed by an act of parliament, which could throw up a lot of unnecessary problems and unwanted media attention. The source even claims that there have been ongoing discussions surrounding this matter, but no decisions have yet been made. This is something that will hopefully be concluded during talks between the king and other senior royals this summer. Do you think the Sussexes should be stripped of their titles? Do Harry and Meghan remind you at all of Wallace and Edward? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and send to a friend. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Kinsey Schofield.